Episode number 20 of Currently Inked for October 20th, 2016 is brought to you by La Couronne de Comte at lacouronnedecompte.nl. Hello everybody, welcome back to another Currently Inked video. Glad to have you here. Got some questions, got some pens, fun stuff. It was another interesting mail week for me. I had a large paper order from the Goulet Pen Company that came in. I had ordered a whole bunch of paper. I ran out of my Tomoe River loose leaf paper, and I needed that for some reviews I was doing. And I run my Tomoe River through my laser printer and to print really, really faint lines on it for letter writing, which has worked out really nicely for me. And so I had run through my last, it's not a ream, it's only 100 sheets, a fifth of a ream, printing up my next batch of letter paper in the hopes that I might actually sit down and write a letter, but that doesn't seem terribly likely. And so I needed to order some more, got a couple more notebooks for work, and a couple more of the small wire-bound dot grids for Pen Habit reviews. So that is all. That was all fun and good. And then I also got a couple of pens in the mail this week. One from a viewer who let me borrow the pen. The other one from Kenro Industries. Both of those are in the Currently Inked section of the video, so I will show you those a little bit later. But that was fun this week too. So you always gotta love the mail call. It's fun stuff. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and dive into questions. We've got a bunch of them this week. Some of them are similar to questions we've had before. So a couple things. First, as always, if you have a question you want to submit, best way to do it is to look down in the description of this video if you're on YouTube, or on Pen Habit. Down toward the bottom of the page, there will be a link that says Submit Questions for Currently Inked. You can click on that, fill out the form, and that's how I get the questions I use for these videos. So, if I don't answer your question, sometimes it'll take me a couple weeks to get to it, but sometimes if it's very similar or identical to a question I've had in a previous video, I won't answer it just because that gets really repetitive, which is hard enough as it is because I tend to be a kind of repetitive person. So, that being said, let's dive in. This first question comes from Michelle in New York, and Michelle said, I know you tire of top 5 questions, so forgive me, never. But she says, could you tell us what your top 5 shading inks are and your top 5 shining inks? And I think you mean sheening inks as opposed to shining. So shading, for me, I think the inks that stick out to me most, I'm not necessarily going to give you 5 or limit myself to just 5. The ones that stick out to me most are Diamine Autumn Oak, Ackermann number 28 Hofgewortier Grün, Sailor Souten is a beautiful one, Mont Blanc Irish Green. Trying to think if there are any others that, and probably Honoré de Balzac Dandy Turquoise. I also get some really nice shading with Edelstein Topaz and, use your words, Matt, Iroshizuku Konpeki. So those are probably my top shading inks as opposed to top sheening inks. And for those who don't know, sheening inks are inks where when the ink pools, a lot of times you'll see kind of a halo of a different color. It's different than the glitter inks where they put particulate matter in there. This is actually one of the natural properties of the dye that's in there as opposed to an additive that gives it sparkle. So some of my top sheening inks are, again, Iroshizuku Konpeki sheens like the Dickens. Iroshizuku Yamabudo also sheens. It's kind of a purpley burgundy ink with a gold sheen to it. Sailor Okuyama and Gentle Grenade. If you can find the Gentle Grenade, it's been out of production for a while. Both sheen quite a bit. Sailor Souten sheens like crazy. Edelstein, Pelikan, Edelstein Topaz sheens. A lot of blue inks will sheen red. That seems to be pretty common. So those are probably some of my top. The Ackerman number 5, Shocking Blue, has a really nice sheen to it. I can't forget Yamadori, Sailor Yamadori, kind of that peacock blue color that it has a wicked sheen on it too. So those are some of my top sheening inks. If you want a purple that sheens, I would highly recommend Cross Violet. It's a cool color. They just reformulated the ink. So it's the one in the kind of rectangular bottle, and it's a neat ink, and it has some nice gold sheen to it as well. So there you go. Right. Grab the next question here. Comes from Hannah in Lancashire, who says, do you know of any other pen brands or models that has a grip similar to the Lamy All-Star and the Jinhao X450, both of which I have? This is the triangular grip that you see on a lot of Lamys and some Jinhaos. The Jinhao 599 is a Lamy knockoff, so that has one as well. She said, I find this grip really suits the way I both hold and write with my fountain pens at an angle of about 10 minutes to 12, if that makes any sense. So I don't know of a lot of pens that have that triangular grip. The one that comes to mind, which is going to be a very, very different price range than the pens you have now, is the Omas 360. That is a triangular pen. The whole pen is triangular, not just the section. I believe the Pelikan Twist also has a triangular section to it. I generally don't lean toward that simply because I find triangular sections actually cause me to rotate the pen even more than I normally do. So I tend to shy away from those. So I'm not super familiar. I'm sure if folks know of other pens that have that triangular section, they will include it down in the notes below. But the ones that pop into my mind, besides the ones you mentioned, are the Pelikan Twist, which is a pretty inexpensive pen, and the Omas 360, which is a pretty not inexpensive pen, or a pretty expensive pen, if I were using my words properly. I normally record these first thing in the morning on Saturday, and it's actually the end of the day today when I'm recording. So it is unusual for me to. I'll probably be a little more spacey than normal because I'm winding down for the day. So all right, let's do a currently inked. So the first pen I am looking at this week is this one. This is the Montegrappa, the Passione. This is a pen, another one of those pens from Kenro Industries. They sent it to me for review purposes, loaned it to me for review purposes, I should clarify. This is the Zebra finish. It's a celluloid finish, silver fittings, solid silver section. You've got that really nice Montegrappa nib, and I have to say this is the nicest Montegrappa nib I've ever used. I've had a couple Montegrappa pens in the past and haven't been really in love with the nibs. I like this nib a whole bunch. It's 18 karat gold nib, wet, smooth, so it's a really nice pen. I've only just barely inked it up. I haven't had hardly any time to write with it, so I can't give you more than I like it so far. It's a cool finish. The celluloid is really neat. And the nib writes well from what little I've used. And I inked it up with an ink I don't use often, but I do like. This is the Noodler's Black Swan and Australian Roses. I shortened it here because that won't fit on the line in my handwriting. It's kind of a purpley ink with almost a dark pink or a reddish undertone. It's lighter than something like Diatramentis Aubergine or Pelikan Edelstein Amethyst or Lavender Purple. So it's in that same color family, but a little bit lighter. So I've had this bottle since forever, really. And this is, when I first got into fountain pens, there was a different formula. It was the same formula, but the dye manufacturer changed their formula. And so the color shifted. I like the old formula a lot more than the new formula, but there's just nothing I can do about that. So the new formula is nice too. It's just, I liked the old one a little bit better. Okay, grab another question here. This one from Jim, or KJim SC in San Francisco, who says, I'm becoming a huge fan of cursive italic nibs, but very few companies seem to offer them as standard options with their pens. Do you have any recommendations for favorite pens that offer a cursive italic as a standard option? Okay, so cursive italic is a very tricky terminology. Depending on who you talk to, there is no such thing as a cursive italic. Some nibmeisters say it's a made-up term. Uh, the idea is that there are italic nibs which are very, very sharp. There are stub nibs which are still pretty flat but much more rounded. And then in between those are cursive italic nibs. It's got the more of the sharpness of the italic but with a little bit more smoothness of the stub. I don't know of a single company that makes cursive italic stock nibs. I don't know of a single one. My hunch is there is not one. I think cursive italics are fairly new to the fountain pen industry as a whole, and so you're either going to get a stub, which is what you're going to get 99% of the time as a factory nib. Very few companies make factory italic nibs because italic nibs can be really scratchy if the people don't know how to use them properly, and then they end up returning them or not buying them or not liking them. And so most companies don't do italics at all. Aurora is one exception to that rule. They do true, sharp, crisp italics from the factory, but they are one of the only ones I know of. I don't know of any company that does factory cursive italic nibs. The only company I know of that sells them as a regular option is Franklin-Christoph, and they have those ground by Mike Masuyama. So they send him the medium, the broad, the fine. He grinds them into cursive italics. So generally speaking, no, I don't know of any company that does that. There might be some out there, but as far as I know, no nib manufacturers make cursive italic nibs. They will either make italic or stub. And then if you want to turn it into a cursive italic, you have to take it to a nibmeister. So that is my understanding anyway. I don't really use flat nibs. I don't care for them, but that's my understanding. So our next question comes from Jeremy in Towson, Maryland. I've not heard of that town. So it's it's a pretty long story here. Short version, he bought a Visconti Van Gogh, loved it, took it to work. The nib was great out of the box. He said it has, the Visconti Van Goghs have those bridge clips like a lot of Viscontis do, and I'll be showing you one in a little bit here. It fell out of his pocket, got damaged a little bit. The medallion came off, and everybody said they would take care of it, and he kept it. But then he started having some of the enamel chipping off and clearing off. For a pen this nice, it was a disappointing experience. And then the question that he comes to at the end is, how do negative pen experiences affect your view and future purchasing decisions of a brand? Does a poor experience keep you from buying more of that company's line, or do you simply chalk it up to the specific pen or model? I know Visconti is a brand you have liked in the past. The Homo sapiens Bronze Age is one I've personally been interested in, and it feels like a go-to next-level pen for many. But the brand does feel like something of a risk at this point, as I read and hear more about folks online talking about issues with the company's products. What are your thoughts on the brand at this point? Okay, so this is a tricky subject, and one that I've struggled to wrap my head around too. So I don't know that I have come to a decision about how a bad experience with one pen in the brand relates to the whole brand. What I will say is that once I have a bad experience with a brand, and it's happened a few times, it hasn't happened a lot. Most of the time when I have a bad experience, it's that the nib behaves in a way differently than what I want it to. It's not necessarily that it's broken, but that it's not what I was hoping for. A perfect example of that is my Pelikan M1000. The nib was a disaster area, and I never got it working again. Now, if the problem is something that I can resolve, I don't care. One of the reasons I still like Visconti pens is, yes, they've got some quality control problems. Yes, their nib quality is inconsistent. However, I have yet to meet a Visconti nib I couldn't fix on my own. or take to a Nibmeister and have them fix. So I'm still willing to give Visconti a chance because I'm comfortable adjusting my own nibs. Now I know, and I hear this all the time in the comments and emails, etc. It's like, if you pay that much for a pen, it should work perfectly out of the box. And I tend to agree with you. That being said, very, very few pens have nibs that I like right out of the box, even in that price range. Because I have become so particular about what I like in my pens and how I like my nibs to write, I find that a lot of the upper end pens, they have their way of adjusting the pen. And if you don't like it, you can change it, but they're not going to change it to match what you want. Now, there are cases, and Visconti has been guilty of this in the past, coming up with nibs that don't write well and can't easily be fixed. I know there's some retailers who have stopped carrying Visconti. I know there are others who have picked up the brand. It's still a very popular brand, and they come out with some really beautiful designs. Now, there are a couple of brands, and I'm not going to go into names here because it's not really important, where I have had so many problems, I've just said, I can't anymore. I won't spend any more of my money on this brand. If you've watched my videos for a long time, you can probably imagine what one of those brands is. But in the meantime, I try to keep an open mind and not let one bad experience turn me off of a brand forever. For me, it's like 2, maybe 3 strikes and you're out. After I've had so many problems, or if I can't fix the problems myself, if the return policies are problematic or the repair policies are problematic, then I'll just throw up my hands and say, you know what, it's just not worth it to me anymore. So that's kind of how I do it. Now, I can only name one brand where I've just written them off entirely. I have started writing off really inexpensive pens simply because they're not the pens I use from day to day, and I don't enjoy the lottery of, am I going to get one that even works? It's not a, can I adjust it to make it work? It's, even if I do adjust it, will it still be broken? And so I'd rather spend my money on things that I know I'm going to like. Again, I've talked about this before, but for me, it's a quality over quantity thing. I'd rather have things that speak to me than a bunch of things that don't really. So, yeah. My thoughts on Visconti are, I will still give them a go. I love their nibs when they're good. When they're not good, they're frustrating but fixable. And most Nibmeisters can fix them for you lickety-split. Palladium is not a terribly difficult, especially if you go with the higher end pens with Palladium nibs. It's not a difficult metal to work with, I don't think. So anyway, there you go. All right, well, speaking of Visconti, this is another pen. It's made many appearances here on the channel. It is the lovely Visconti Divina Elegance Blue. So I just love the Divina line. I love this 5-sided swirly pattern. It's really beautiful. The silver inlaid spirals there and how everything lines up, and the safety hook latch system for the cap. A lot of people just hate this bridge clip. I don't mind it. I almost never keep my pens in my pocket like that. So especially not a pen this large. This is a big, to do the Stephen Brown thing, this is a big long pen. So this is not one I would ever put in my pocket. So I'm less worried about that sort of thing. But I actually kind of like the design on the bridge clip. So, and I have that one inked with Parker Penman Emerald. So this is an ink. Someone found a couple bottles of this ink, sent it to me, and it is very quickly becoming one of my favorite green inks ever. Got some nice shading, got some really cool sheen in it. It is really a pretty, pretty, pretty green color. I like it a whole bunch. So, yeah, there you go. All right, more questions. This next one comes from Andrea or Andrea, I don't know how you pronounce it, who is somewhere in Europe, who says, I would really like to order a currently inked notebook, but I'm using Midori's passbook-sized notebook covers. If there was enough interest, would you consider adding the passport size to your selection? The answer to that is a real definite maybe. To be real honest, I have gotten a couple of requests for the passport sizes, but not a lot of requests. And it's a fair bit of work. It's less of a problem with the lined notebooks and the blank notebooks that I'm doing currently. I can actually take the ones that I have and cut them down to passport size, no problem. The currently inked one is a little more difficult because I have to go in and basically resize the interiors to make them fit inside that slightly different format. I get a lot of requests for different size notebooks. I'm not sure what I will do or when I will do it or even if I will do it. But I suppose if there is enough of a demand out there, I could certainly look into doing a passport size notebook. It certainly is doable, and I know I've had a couple requests for it before, but not a lot. What I would hate to do is, with any sort of manufacturing, you order more parts and the price per part goes down. So in order for me to get a decent price per unit, I have to order a whole bunch, and I've already got about 20 boxes of notebooks sitting around my house right now. So for me to go through a new size, a new format, I would have to be pretty sure that there's going to be a big ask for that particular thing. So yeah, I'm not closing the door on it, but I'm saying I'd have to see a lot more demonstrated interest before I think I would go down that road too far. So, okay. Next question comes from Omas Lover in Ohio, who says, I was interested in increasing the ink flow of one of my pens. I carefully followed your tutorial video and everything seems to work. I was very pleased until the next morning when I tried to use the pen again and realized that my nib had a tremendous memory. The pen was dry again. Can anything be done to tune temperamental nibs in the way that like the way they look? So I can't say that I've had this problem, and I'm wondering if when you adjusted the nib, the additional wetness wasn't permanent, but was a cause of saturating the feed as part of, I don't know if you took the nib out of the unit, out of the pen, or put it back in, or inked the pen up or something like that. But you could have gotten a false sense of how wet the pen was by getting the feed saturated, or breaking the vacuum on the pen. I would be interested to know, is the pen, does it start off wet and then go dry over time, or does it start dry and stay dry? If it's the latter, you've got a case of ink starvation, not a case of ink flow problems. As for, do nibs like to get their memory? I can't say that I've ever seen that happen. I'm sure it probably can. But what I would say is make sure that you actually fix the problem, because you may not have fixed it in the first place. It may have been a false positive for you. So that's what I would say. And then give it a try again. Don't be afraid to give it another go if you feel it's still not quite where you are. Just obviously be careful with everything and make sure you're following all the good guidelines and the best practices. But aside from that, I think you'll be okay. Okay. Now, the other pen that came in the mail this week that I talked about a little bit is this one. Now, this is a Pelikan pen. This is called the Pelikan Calculation of Times. So it's got the months of the year on here, and not the months of the year. I haven't actually taken a serious look at this. Actually, they are the months of the year on here, and you've got the sun with the little times on there. So it's an interesting pen. I'm not going to tell you too much what I think about it yet, because A, I haven't had much time to play around with it, and B, I want to save some for the review. But got that nice, very cool nib. I like the nib a lot on that. That's kind of sunburst and right in the middle of the nib. It's a broad, and Pelikan broads are broad. But yeah, it's a cool looking pen. I do like the figures on the barrel of the pen. So yeah, stay tuned for more about that interesting pen. And thank you, James, for loaning that to me to take a look at and review. So I've got that inked with the with Pilot Blue, just kind of standard everyday Pilot Blue, which I have to say I am not a fan of that ink. Yawn. That to me is like school blue, the blue that you would write with when you were in school. That no, it just doesn't do anything for me. Next question comes, if the site will update. Another one here from, actually, you know what? I'm just going to institute a new rule. You can only get one question answered per episode. So if you submit many, it'll probably take me several weeks to get through. Mona from Michigan, go Michigan, that's where I grew up, says, how do you feel about Pelikan binds, bins, I don't know how that's pronounced, done by custom pen makers? Thank you for the great reviews. Well, thank you. I appreciate the kind words. So on Pelikan's standard production line pens, like the M400, M600, M800, M1000, that center section of the barrel, this is not a Pelikan, so, but this part right here is actually it's a sleeve of material that slides over the inner chamber of the pen. And then it's all, kind of put together. Several custom pen makers have taken to removing that and replacing it with a different material. So the first one of those I saw was one that Jonathan Brooks of the Carolina Pen Company did, and he replaced it with pink stripe material, which came out about a few months before the real Pelikan pink came out. I've seen Sean Newton do a few of those. I actually really like them. I think they look really cool, especially if you can get it with a neat material, a vintage material, something like that. I've considered having that done to one of my pens, but the only Pelikan I still, the M1000, I don't want to put any more money into it because I just don't care for the pen very much. The M800, the only one of those I still have is the brown tortoise, and I'm not going to take the material off that. That is beautiful on its own right. So if I were to do that, I'd have to buy another M800 and then pay to have a new bin put on. So I've got no problem with it. I think the ones I've seen have looked beautiful. I really like them. I'm just not sure I would go to the effort of buying a new Pelikan just so I could have a custom bin put on it. If I was going to do that, I'd just as soon spend the money to get a custom-made pen that is a little bit more in keeping with what I would want. Which is cool because I have another custom-made pen in the queue. I can't wait until that. It's probably not going to get done for the next 5-6 months, but when it does, it is made out of the most gorgeous material. I'm super excited about it. Another question, this one from Steve in Springfield, Illinois, who says, would you tell us about how to use Fude nibs? What are they for? I think you mean Fude, F-U-D-E, instead of F-U-D-U. If you do mean Fudu, I have no idea what that is. So if you mean Fude, what those are nibs where, if this is your standard nib, then they take the tip and bend it up. So there's a writing surface that is, again, I'll see if I can draw this. It probably won't show up real well on my little document here. But if this is your nib, let's try this. A Fude nib looks like that. So what it is, and it's not like a 90-degree angle, it's more like a 45-degree angle. And the idea behind it is, if you write at a really high angle, you're going to get a very fine line. And as you roll the pen down vertically, so as you go from here to here, you're going to get wider and wider and wider until you've got a big fat line. From what I understand, they're used a lot in Asian-style calligraphies. It's not. I've used a couple of them. they're fun to play around with. They're not something I would ever use for actually writing. So if you're going to draw or do some of those, character-based calligraphies, I think they're fun to play around with and fun to have around. But if you want to write with them, don't bother, in my not very humble opinion. So, I've most of the people who I've seen use them for sketching because they can get both really wide and really narrow lines based on how they write. Other nibs that do the same sort of thing, I know Franklin Christoph sells something called a SIG, S-I-G, which is it's like a stub italic gradient, where you can get a little bit of line variation. Sailor has a zoom nib that does the same thing. It's the tip, instead of being round, is kind of cut into a diamond or a triangle shape. It's kind of like this, and so as you roll it up, less of the foot touches the paper. Again, I don't really use those for day-to-day writing. It's not my thing, but that's my understanding of how they work. Well, before we move on to the next pen, allow me to take a quick moment to thank the sponsor of this episode, La Couronne de Comte. So they have been a longtime sponsor of the Pen Habit. Now, if you've ever experienced the joy of getting a package from La Couronne de Comte, you understand what I mean. But they wrap their orders in this beautiful metallic green paper, wrapped, and they're pristine, wrapped in a ribbon. So, anytime you order something from them, it's like you're buying a present for yourself, which most of the time you are. They have a huge selection of pens. They have probably one of the largest selections of pens of any internet retailer out there. I mean, they have everything, and everything from really inexpensive, affordable pens to very expensive, very high-end pens. Now, if you are one of my many US-based viewers, one of the things I talk about often, if you're trying to save money, is to look to the European Union. La Couronne de Comte is based in the Netherlands. They've been in business since 2008. But if you are outside of the European Union, chances are you can get an automatic 20% discount on anything you order just by ordering it. If you're inside the European Union, you have to pay VAT tax, which the value-added tax. So if you're not inside the union, you don't have to pay that. In addition, depending on how the exchange rate is and different prices in different regions, you can get some really, really great deals. So La Couronne de Comte, as I said, has been a really great sponsor for the Pen Habit. They've been very supportive. I ordered one of my Pelicans from them, not the M1000 that I didn't like very much. It's the Stressamon, the M805 Stressamon is a pen that I ordered from them. Great service, and I'm telling you that when that package arrives with the green wrapping paper and the ribbon, that's what makes fountain pen collecting and buying fun. Some stuff like that. One other quick thing to mention is that if you use the code PENHABIT10 on the website when you check out, you get an additional 10% off your order from La Couronne de Comte. I do believe that is the only thing that does not apply to is Montblanc items, because Montblanc items cannot be discounted. So, but yeah, they are out of Tilburg in the Netherlands. Amazing selection of pens. Great support of the Pen Habit. Again, thank them. As I say every time when I talk about my sponsors, if you order something from them, please thank them for the support of the Pen Habit, just to let them know how much you appreciate it, because I appreciate it. All right. I think it's time for one more pen, maybe a couple more questions. This one's going to be another not much of a surprise. Ta-da! So this is the Mineral Ore Classic Pens LB5, number 25 of 50. This is the Kaoseki. So this is just a kind of lovely caramelly brown color. I like this pen. I've been swapping the nibs back and forth between them. So this one has a nice broad nib on it. Now, I haven't done anything to this nib yet, but I think after using it, I haven't used this pen very much since I got it. I bought it used. It came, I got a really good deal on it. I bought it used because I wanted to get the whole set. I love them so much. And it came, and I've been using it, and I like it. I love what it does to my handwriting. The nib is a little more feedback prone than I like, so I'm going to try to smooth it out probably a little bit before I write this one empty. And Yeah, it's a pretty lovely pen. And I've got it inked up with KWZ Honey. I mean, come on, if you're one of those people who likes to match your pen to your ink, can't do a whole lot better than that, can you? Now, this is the new formula. I think I've talked about it before, but in case I haven't, Conrad from KWZ just recently changed the formula of KWZ Honey and Quizzy Menthol Green. The menthol green, as I understand it, was the formula was changed slightly to people were complaining about it having kind of an oily texture on the paper or seeping through the paper over time. Apparently that I never used it before the formula changed, so I don't have any frame of reference there. The new formula of KWZ Honey is very, very, very close in color. To me, it looks just a little bit different. And just a tiny bit less shading, although Conrad swears that there is absolutely no difference other than the biocide that he put in there to kill the the creepy crawlies from growing in the pen. So the biocide he was using before had a very, very strong odor. It didn't bother me all that much, but it really did bother some people. So he's changed it out. I like the new formula a lot. I think I like the old formula just a tiny bit better, but this new formula is still really beautiful. So, and I am going to be having a review of this ink coming up really soon. I think it's a week and a half from now. Unfortunately, it is a review of the old formula, but the new formula is so similar that I think it will apply pretty much across the board, and you'll be able to see the way it functions. So anyway, that will be coming up. Maybe, let's see, what are we doing for time here? Doing okay. Somehow these went from being under half an hour to being under 45 minutes. I answered that question about a week or two ago. So Parsa from Dallas asks, what do you tell yourself when you buy more of essentially the same pen? It seems like a waste of money to me because I think that money could have been spent on something new, yet I find myself drooling over buying another Graf von Faber-Castell of the same design. You have multiple LB5s, so you're no stranger to having many of the same thing. Those also cost a whole bunch, I'm translating, each, so I imagine you have a reason. So I don't generally buy multiples of the same pen. There are a few exceptions to that, the Classic Pen LB5s being one of them, the other ones being the Aurora Optimus. I have 2 of those. I have 4 of the Classic Pen LB5s. Everything else in my collection is pretty much a one-off. I did have 2 Pelikan M800s at one time. I only have 1 now. So for me, when I do buy multiples, the reason I buy multiples is because I love the thing so much that I want to have multiples available to me. I would be surprised if I ever find a pen I like more than my LB5s. This just feels like the perfect pen to me. And so to have multiple variations of them, have different nibs, have different colors, that sort of thing, is what I enjoy. And that really comes down to it. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit more in the next question. But is it a waste of money? Well, let's be honest. Buying fountain pens at all could be very easily classified as a waste of money. Any money you spend on a fountain pen at all could be used for something else. And I don't want to get too deep into economic theory here, but we buy the things that make us happy. We buy the things that we need to survive, and then if there's extra left over, we buy the things that make us happy. Sometimes those things are really inexpensive. A large Diet Coke from McDonald's makes me happy, and it's $1, so I will go buy it. By the way, don't bother posting how bad Diet Coke is for you. I know. I simply don't care. I love it. At the same time, my Classic Pen LB5s make me happy, and I could buy basically 1,200 McDonald's large Diet Cokes for the price of one of these. Is this pen a waste of money? Yes, absolutely. But it's my waste of money, and it makes me happy. Now, I get not everybody can spend that kind of money. I get it. I understand it. Even if you could spend that kind of money, you may very well choose not to because the value is not there for you. And that's totally fine, because you can find happiness, you can find value, you can find joy in other things. That's one of the problems, and I'm going to get up on a soapbox here for a second. That's one of the problems with this hobby, is that we are so, and I'm guilty of this both as a victim and as a perpetrator. We are so focused on acquiring new things, that we forget sometimes just the information is the value. Knowing about the pens can be really valuable and a lot of fun. I don't need to own every pen. I can love to look at vintage pens and not need to own a single one of them. Or I could drool over flexible music nibs all day long. I've looked for them. And I realized recently that I'm never going to use a nib like that. So why bother? To me, that's the real waste of money. If you're spending money on something that you don't like or you don't want, or that isn't going to bring you happiness, if for you buying an additional pen of the same type isn't going to bring you as much of whatever that the first pen did, whether it's happiness or peace or joy or enjoyment or energy or whatever it is that it brings you, then there's going to come a tipping point where it's just not worth it to buy another one. So looking at it, is it a waste of money? It's only a waste of money if you buy it and don't like it and don't use it and don't want it. If it's a waste of money if you can't afford to not have that money. If you're spending money that you need to pay your bills or pay off your credit card debts or whatever it is, to buy a second Classic Pens LB5, it's a waste of money. If you can afford it, if it makes you happy, great, buy it. But so that's kind of my take on it. I'm sure other people feel differently. And I've gotten some really snotty comments recently from people who've said, well, I'm just giving up on this whole hobby because I can't buy any of the pens that you talk about. And, some of the pens I talk about are $15. So if you can't buy a $15 pen and being around this hobby makes you unhappy, then by all means, go find something else that makes you happy. I get it. Not everyone can afford all of the pens that are out there. I can't afford all the pens that are out there, and I spend a whole lot more on pens than most people will ever be able to, mainly because I don't have anybody in my life telling me what I can and can't spend my money on. I'm single. I get to do what I want with my money, and sometimes I don't always make the wisest choices. So anyway, the final question I want to touch on today didn't come in through the form, and I almost never answer questions that don't come in through the form, but I wanted to because I loved it so much. And it ties into the last question a lot. So this question is from Jonathan Deans, who runs the very wonderful Pen Economics blog. If you don't know peneconomics.com, go over there, read the blog. He does some really fascinating blog posts. And I love the way that he looks at the fountain pen community from a completely different angle than almost anybody else out there. Not almost. He has a very unique perspective that I like and appreciate. And I also like that even when I don't agree with him on certain things, he backs up his thoughts. He reasons through why he thinks the way he does. And I always walk away thinking differently about whatever subject he's written about, which is, in my mind, the best kind of writing. It's like, even if I walk away not agreeing with your, final assumption, the fact that you made me think and question my preconceived beliefs is the sign of great writing, in my opinion. So with that being said, we email back and forth every now and again, what with us both being, pen personalities, whatever that means. And one of the things he asked was, how many pens is too many? Which is such a great question because there is absolutely no answer to it. Or maybe a better way of saying, I think the answer is very, very unique and independent per person. I will tell you that I'm getting real close to, I don't know how I'd say the end of my pen acquisitions, but I have certainly gotten to the end of my heedless acquisitions. And it takes an awful, awful lot to get me to shell out money for a pen anymore. I could be really happy with never buying a pen again and just using the pens I have. Now, does that mean I will never buy a pen again? Nope. I'm absolutely 100% certain I will. But it's becoming more and more difficult for me to find a pen that crosses the threshold of something I'm willing to spend my money on. So for me, and this is just me, for me, too many is when you have more pens than you can ever enjoy using. I've got too much ink. There's literally, if all I did all day long, every day for the rest of my life was sit down and write for 8 hours a day, I would never get through all of the ink I own. So I have too much ink with my own ecosystem. Now, in the last question, I talked about being happy. Does my ink make me happy? Yeah, it kind of does. It's stupid that it does, but it kind of does. With pens, I have 3 pen cases or 3 pen boxes. One of them is a big toolbox that has some liners in it. Then I've got a 26 pen and a 32 pen box. They're all mostly full. Now, a lot of the pens that are in some of those boxes right now are pens that are on loan or that have been given to me to give away later on, so they're not mine to keep. My core group of pens is pretty small. I keep a few around for review purposes or for size comparison purposes, but I never use them. Those are just around because I use them as part of the pen habit. But if I weren't doing the pen habit, I'd sell them. So for me, the answer to that question is you've got too many pens when you can't appreciate and enjoy the next one. Well, no. Let me rephrase that. When what you have is the maximum of what you can appreciate and enjoy. If you can appreciate and enjoy, the cost benefit analysis for you is high enough that it's worth it to buy another pen, then you probably don't have too many pens. Now, I know a gentleman who lives in this area. His name's, I think, Bill Saxauer. Bill? I know his name's Bill. I'm probably massacring his last name. Who has literally thousands upon thousands of Sheaffer pens. I met him at the Seattle Pen Club. He is a longtime Sheaffer collector, and he's got this notebook, the Levenger Circa notebooks, which just has, is probably about that thick and is just full of tiny print spreadsheets of every pen in his collection, just huge chest of pens. And I've not seen his whole collection. I've seen a few of them. But, he told me when he passes away, his collection is going to the Sheaffer Museum, which I think is really cool. Now, does he have too many pens? Now, I can't speak for him, but my hunch is probably not, because he still enjoys them. And he has a goal. He has a mission. He has a purpose for what he buys and why he has what he has. That would be too many for me because I don't have that goal. I don't have that purpose. If you are acquiring simply to acquire, you probably have too many pens. If you are acquiring to fulfill a purpose of some kind, even if that purpose is, I want to have one of everything, I don't think you've got too many. Now, this last 30 minutes or 20 minutes anyway, of the podcast got a little philosophical and preachy, and that's not necessarily what I intended. But I like questions like that because it's a little bit different than what's your top pen of all time? What's your top ink of all time? Which I'm sure I will still get. They kind of make those questions, in all honesty, kind of make me roll my eyes a little bit because I get them so often. But that's the joy of doing this kind of thing is you get new people coming in as old people go out, and it's a cycle. It's fun. So anyway, a quick thank you again to La Couronne de Comte for sponsoring this episode of Currently Inked and being a longtime sponsor of penhabit.com. Don't forget to check out the show notes over on penhabit.com for time codes of all the stuff we talked about, links to La Couronne de Comte, including the coupon code PENHABIT10, all one word, all caps. And we will look forward to seeing you here next week on Currently Inked. Thanks so much for watching. Bye.